What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and yes, this is another Last of Us 2 review. There just hasn't been enough discussion about the game. You know it, and I know it, and we barely really hear anything about this title anymore. Why? Well, hell, I do not know, but I do know what the world needs right now is a talentless YouTuber with a channel putting their 2 cents into the conversation to, really finally draw it all to a close, to really put that certified stamp on it. And that's what we're going to do today. You guys know I buy every game I review, even if the dev gave me a code. And for some context here for a second, I was offered a code prior to launch, but the embargo and the timing made absolutely no damn sense. So I passed it up and just waited with you guys. Last of Us 2 continues the tale of Ellie and Joel after the original game, a third-person action stealth, platforming and crawling and crouching and cutting and clubbing adventure that has you taking on the world after the cordyceps fungus began infecting people and making them look about as healthy as a bachelor party limo's carpet. Let's begin. Is Last of Us 2 just pearls before swine? Or, in the shocking truth of it all, is it just that many of us probably like different things for different reasons? And remember to subscribe, especially if you like your reviews from people who buy the games as well. Graphics are up first. So Naughty Dog, they're not full-blown magic users technically, but they'd probably be at least your D&D party's hedge wizard, remembering that the PS4 and in turn the PS4 Pro are now purely in that forward focus section of true power when it comes to gaming platforms performance. Last of Us 2 shows just what you can do with time, probably close to unlimited resources, and almost total familiarity with your machine. We can start with how realistic it looks when you turn someone's neck into a friggin' flute with perfectly animated stab wounds, but everyone has talked about that, so let's start out somewhere else. Let's look at Last of Us 2 and somehow how it offers a sense of grandeur despite the increeping fog of despair that it delivers throughout the entire story. From the very start, massive draw distances mate perfectly with almost absolutely stable image quality, meaning up close or looking through the scope of a 6x on an old Remington, the world has a layering and an attention to presentation regardless. That, I think, with a lot of games we just don't see. Or what about when you crawl through one area's exit into the entry of another like a birthing baby, and this camera pans back to show you the entirety of a location, sparing neither massive vistas nor smaller, more contained, detailed environments that you're going to explore, and their fundamental details. This results in a world that far or near feels a bit more realistic, or at the very least, holistic to those other areas around it. So too, though, are the characters, who aside from one or two oddities, animate incredibly well, reaching out to move objects in their way, touching and interacting with them without that 1-inch rule crap that we see in a lot of games where it looks like everyone doesn't want to invade the personal bubble of any physical item, or two characters standing near an oblation to some enigmatic benefactor and politely moving around it, and there's a sense of humbleness that exudes in that mocap. Incredible presentation from start to finish there. If fidelity to visual storytelling is really the essence of Naughty Dog's focus, then its crux has to be eliciting that feeling of humanity from characters that really still have not crawled up and out of the uncanny valley. We just aren't there yet, but they do attack this difficulty with precise movements, caught both by gameplay visuals as well as the cutscenes, as Ellie and Joel and company tug and fondle and finger and push and grab and pull and yank and slide and jerk pretty much every item in the game world. The first time you throw a rope line over something in this game, it reminds you that these are the guys who created that amazing tow winch in Uncharted. But then you slide down a cable here and the actual cable interacts with the character's hands. While not perfect, it feels like a real thing, and that goes so far for eliciting a feeling of immersion. It's always those small things that add up. It's the shading on a painting to make a mountain not look like a friggin' white capped triangle in your face. I have seen people going on and on about the death animations, and yeah, they're actually good with a lot of up close in your face capture moments, especially during the specific kills. It's hard not to feel a weird pang of regret at least the first time when somebody is slowly choked to death and you can see them blinking in this profound state of terror. Also, the foliage in Last of Us 2, it's incredible. The grass in the game makes other games' grass look like grass in games, if you get my drift. However, there are some issues here. Last of Us 2 is not open world. Interestingly so, in many places, it's not even really open level, and that can cause a claustrophobic feeling to crop up here repeatedly, even more so than the first game, where you realize that you're in a little valley of playable areas and everything sheer next to you is either impassable or the only way to move forward. They try their best to crop it using buildings you can enter, and that does work for a little while, but the effect actually wears thin the longer you play the game, and it's not a short game. Some areas this really hurts are where it feels like you're not in a small part of the city. You're actually in a thin line of a location with nothing to do but work from one end of the other. This is something that we see in a Gears of War title as well, where you run into a spot and you see a bunch of conveniently placed strange walls and you realize, yeah, there's going to be a battle here. Same thing happens here. If there's anything instantly noticeable in the game, it's that many of the locations and just world spots have some really rough textures as well in some of those spots. It's off the beaten path sometimes, or on a floor, on a wall. It's not in your face like Final Fantasy VII's notorious Door of Custard moment, but it can be noticeable, and I figured I'd mention it. And speaking of something that absolutely has to be mentioned, moving into buildings. Some of them, a large number of them, have secret locations or off the beaten path moments that you can engage in. And Naughty Dog's focus on making sure that nothing looks the same means that, unlike other titles and other games, most of these locations look so structurally different that reuse of the items feels less like some technical hurdle that couldn't leap over and more of a reflection that modern society just fame whores off one another by buying from IKEA and then telling all their best friends anyway. But when it comes to the denizens of the deep themselves, The Last of Us has always been compared to zombie movies and the clickers and so forth, and I think that's fine. Assorted bastardkin have always overlapped in various zombie archetypes. There are a couple surprises here, and the jump in visual quality, especially displaying them versus the first game, is immense. Here's the thing though, above everything else, it is the lighting in this game. Many games have this odd issue with lighting looking flat, especially in overcast days, and I've discussed this in other videos, and there's technical reasons why. The Last of Us 2 almost completely does away with that, and that flatness is gone. Where other games exhibit something that just doesn't feel alive, here it's simply richer or a deeper color palette. It's noticeable. But does it run incredible? It's not rock solid, that's for sure. It is 30 FPS, we've all known that, so if you expected magically it to be 60, well, that's on you. This is upscaled to 4K on the PS4 Pro, but even on the basic PS4, the game is incredible looking with excellent effects and just an overall precision that's unrecognizable in many other companies' effects and efforts. From each character's changing bodies as the game jumps, often many times, to prior moments in their lives, to stealthily moving past enemies, human and otherwise, and seeing their animations, it's good. Though with some of those drops less than 30, that can be noticeably a little bit of stutter, especially in some of the more effects-laden areas. Still, not bad at all. And that brings us to sound, music, and voice. And let's do sound first. So Last of Us 2 certainly does raise the bar for sound. I saw some people getting all sorts of surround sound errors in the game and issues. I saw forum posts and tweets. I had none of those. What I had was an incredible environmental sound effect throughout. Sounds that easily are probably some of the most immersive and environmentally solid sounds of this generation. From water spilling off not one, but two or three small cracks in the broken road and hearing them separately, but also the patter of rain off of a motorcycle gas tank. And they were just sample perfect. Or how the rain hits the rear of a destroyed taxi that never got its last fare versus the cab itself. And you can actually hear the larger volume of the cab reflected in the drop sounds. Processing is done incredibly well, whether you're under the ground and hearing all that wet slurping sound of, well, whatever it is down there, as it sort of cocoons you in this alien world. When we're all discussing the illusion of these worlds much of the time and their immersion, a lot of times visuals are brought up and people forget how audio can tell and enhance the tale. Look no further than fighting the Scars in this game. Facing off against them the first time, it's like fighting the world's angriest set of friggin' barn swallows. Their secondary language comes up as whistles to alert and identify and track and terrorize you throughout the game, just whistling and re-whistling back and forth like the only thing they have ever had a chance to watch was a master whistler on an old BBC video. What intrigued me here is the illusion of mystery is purposely broken when you start eradicating them, which is an audio reflection of the hunter becoming the hunted, and that's Last of Us 2 at its very core. At this point, they start whistling furiously and you're just taking them out, start dispatching one after the other, and then they start using words, especially in the later half of the game. It works really well to show that these hunters, that first sort of send chills up your body when you hear their mysterious warble in the undergrowth, are really just a bunch of dudes who like to whistle. And that brings us to music.
I know you're out there!
Stupid.
Casualties reported in 14. All available units report. Over.
So the game's music spends a good deal of its time in the background, that is for sure, unless cutscenes play. This is usually meted out with a depressing score. It feels like it's got its place here, but it also feels like it should be something from the movie The Road or Book of Eli or something to that effect. Even when you're in a reprieve moment around the memories of some far-off, slightly better time, it's only just slightly better. And that's the original score's moments itself. However, the game does channel in familiar tracks in various ways. While not at all subtle, it does work tremendously well to get a bit of emotion from you. Now, those moments are usually when somebody sits down to play the guitar, and it's basically an acoustic or rough version of an older song from the real world. This is what I like about the game, is you can have people on Twitter right now playing Johnny Cash Hurt to Here Comes the Sun, because the guitar is actually a full-blown working guitar, basically, in the game, which is very cool. Also, the quick beating but basic beat during the battles, I think, is a superb accompaniment to the more ambient tracks, and it does at the very least get your blood flowing a little bit when you engage with some of those enemies. And next, we're going to talk about voice.
I don't know what happened. I was supposed to take her to the Fireflies and walk away. Come on.
It's okay. I got him. You go on.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right.
About what we were talking about earlier. I can't say I'd have done different.
Then we split up. Go at it from different sides, and we can cover the whole thing in a few hours.
I don't like you riding solo. We don't know what's out there.
Exactly. What if they need help?
Okay, I'll head west. Dina can take south, and you come from the east, but be smart about it, yeah?
Yeah.
Now, first, I want to preface this. They were very well done. I have my issues with the story, and I'm going to bring those up. But right now, we're just talking about performance, and these guys are performing with what they have. Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, best known for her role as Claude Van Damme's daughter in the award-winning Lionheart. Go check that out, by the way. They do excellent. And with what they have in their delivery, I think it's fine. In particular, some of the later flashbacks with Joel, where it felt a little bit like Troy was actually somehow somewhat more comfortable with where the character was in those scenes. Whether in tangential moments where characters are talking and moving around the world, or the full-blown cutscenes, every character has their passions and worries and hates and clinging sentiments that lead to seductively simple actions with brutal results. That is one more theme in The Last of Us 2. Strangely enough, though, I found two side characters to be my favorite in the games. Both are fundamentally more balanced than the two leads, but if you pay attention to the story, these guys are catalysts for a great deal of the 20-plus hours of murder and mayhem that the game actually has. They both are really kings of heartfelt choices with bad results, and they balance their love for community and home with their desire to protect, or in one case, enact utter destructive vengeance. Jeffrey Pierce in particular, excellent as Tommy, Joel's brother, and he has a much wider casting in this game than in the prior. He also offers weight to that acknowledgement that Joel himself is not, nor will he ever be, a full person. Instead, Tommy almost consistently has to work as an intermediary between everyone else and Joel. It's an excellent turn on what you think of the plot, and that is what shows that voice matters in games. People should cover this more. I like listening to the enemies yelling for their friends when I off somebody. Call me heartless, but I like enemies to fear me. You can't always see that in a game. That shake of a person's hand when they face off against someone and adrenaline starts rushing, or the look of fear. Here, though, you can hear them searching, and at that moment, especially if you buy into all this revenge, it's hard not to think to yourself, oh yeah, fear me, suckers. Voice acting-wise, Laura, Ashley, Troy, Derek, Jeffrey, Steven, there's probably some others I'm forgetting. They all do a great job. And that brings us to gameplay and a bit about the story. In an overlooked series, Dakota Fanning's character at Steven Spielberg's Alien Encounter TV show Taken once said, "What choice do you make when every choice hurts?" Strangely enough, this was a show focusing more on the alienation of people that were abducted than it did on the aliens, something that is directly mirrored in The Last of Us 2. Alienation amongst peers. That fake camaraderie, or at least acceptance of one another, that was so readily built into that unsteady house of cards by the lies in the first game, utterly collapses here, due to both the lies told to one another, but more importantly, lies that every character told themselves. And that's how Last of Us 2 starts, right sort of in the middle, then it jumps to near the end, then it goes back to the start, then in the middle, back to the start again. I'll discuss how that can sort of screw some things up too. Now, speaking of starting, let's start with the good. The game is absolutely almost barren of any of the normal after the fall of the world tropes when it comes to various human groups. You know what I mean? When everyone looks so messed up, it feels like God should have just used Grammarly first before writing their DNA. It helps Last of Us 2 feel a bit more unique in a cluttered genre. Now, one thing that isn't different is the gameplay style, and Last of Us 2 starts you solidly on the power side of things, reflecting a bit more of the ending of the original game. One thing I like about this is it means that while you do end up getting skills and so forth, it makes you feel like there is some progression. New enemies are meted out and you get those skills to better yourself at like shooting and doing more damage with guns, extra life, and so on. But even when you start out, you're able to get into an area and with just a little bit of careful thought, weave an ass kicking that would require the entire enemy force to buy a giant bottle of Bengay and just hot tub in it for like a week. You move through the storyline, you clamber through locations, you fight off clickers and humans and friends who were friends but are now enemies and enemies who are now clickers, and many times can actually use them against one another. I do feel, though, that the entire Cordyceps theme is underused here. It would have been nice to see more than a couple new situations and enemies. Throughout the game, there are workbenches to upgrade items, add scopes and bigger magazines and so forth onto all of the guns and some of the melee weapons. Depending on the difficulty you choose, this is either absolutely required or is just sort of a nice gameplay add. It never gets in the way. Now, movement here is fundamental in stealth games, and for the most part, it's done well here, with you able to slick past an enemy, leap through a window, circle them, and hit them in the head with a glass bottle, and quickly dispatch them with a stealth kill while their friend is unaware, as long as you plan ahead. Firefights, though, they feel decidedly less enjoyable. You can choose all manner of setups, including no auto-aim, some auto-aim, and different levels of auto-aim. Off is probably the best even for a person who is not great on controllers, because it seems to either get confused when a couple enemies are in front of you, which happens most of the time, or just doesn't really click on at all. Also, guns, even with the upgrades, didn't really feel all that good. I do like some of the later weapons. There's a dual over-under shotgun, as you've noticed I've mentioned like 2 or 3 times. It is just really enjoyable to shoot people with that, and the game's dismemberment engine means that if you hit someone with a long rifle or that hunting pistol, there is a very good chance they're going to be sniffing their own toe as their leg is laying next to them as you shear it right off their body. When it comes to the enemy AI itself, it's okay. It is not great shakes. It does flank in good ways, which I liked, but it was also a bit easy to shrug off. You can go in there and adjust and turn it off and on and really mess around with those settings, which I absolutely loved. I think anybody who's fairly okay at games can keep most of these settings on. Sadly, this is one of those games I think that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that achievements, technological and sound and music and graphics do not alleviate the game's core issues. It fucking drags. It drags on like no other title I can remember in my life. If it were a book, Tolkien would tap out at about 500 pages. Another problem is it's actually decidedly not fun for a good deal of that because of how the game continually pulls you out of sections to tell you a bit of story or adjust something, and it can never really get going. It's ridiculous. It's delivered with all the subtlety of reading a bullet point on Game of Thrones in some places where really I think more subtlety would have been used, and then other place where you shouldn't have subtlety. It doesn't make any sense, and most of the characters are just like, you'll find out, like a bunch of friggin' Sphinx. Where the cutscenes at least tried to define the bookends of the gameplay front and back, I think. Other than a couple great scenes with Joel and Ellie and flashbacks and one with Abby, it feels ramshackle. It feels like they didn't really know in what order to put everything. Now, as you progress in the story, you go out onto these missions using special weapons as well as the tried and true weapons you'd all expect. You've got your revolvers and crossbows and bows and shotguns and hunter handguns, I think, and more. And you're able to upgrade all of them with scrap you find. You can also upgrade yourself in various skill trees as you find survival books. Now, you upgrade by finding drugs around the game world, just pills and shit lying around. I guess it's supposed to be like that movie Limitless or something. So you're just run through the levels looking like you're doing a gun kata from that movie Christian Bale was in, but it's really just you hog snorting whatever these vitamins are and unlocking skills. Now, the game does split styles as you go on, too. For the first 10 or so hours, you're Ellie, solidly the stealth character with a trusty knife she can silently off enemies with, as well as an assortment of go-loud weapons. Later on, you play as Abby, who plays far more like Joel in the original game. Heavy firepower and thunder hammering enemies, human and clicker alike, with strikes that probably make Hulk question coming out of Banner. Weirdly enough, Abby can't find a friggin' knife, so it just leaves you Chronicles of Ridiculous leaning out there, stabbing enemies with sharpened Coors can tabs all the time. It's incredibly transparent in a way to force two characters to feel different, but since they are like that and there's literally knives everywhere, just pick the damn thing up. Luckily, both characters can grab secondary weapons like machetes and wrenches and crowbars. You can also make your own if you have that skill, and nothing says home run like smashing somebody in the snorker with a Louisville Slugger you taped a child's pair of safety scissors to. Action-wise, the game isn't bad at all. It's not perfect. It's got the same hit Y to dodge shit since Batman and a couple of other games made it popular. But for a game that intersperses up-close gunfire, up-close fist fighting, up-close stealth kills with long-range rifle fire, and then mid-range assault rifles, and then throws in bombs, it could have been much, much worse. But I have to give them a kudo. Naughty Dog have done wonders with accessibility. There are more options in the accessibility menu in The Last of Us 2 than there are in the last 5 games I reviewed. You know how I know? I went and friggin' counted them. Everything from color blindness to basically playing it by sound. You can have all types of gunplay assists, gameplay assists, to climbing assists and more. Everyone needs to have even a third as many options as this game has. Fantastic, bravo to them. What's not fantastic though is the game's AI on your comrades. While playing, there are many times where the AI just doesn't do much, and you can set it to ultra aggressive, but many times that just means they sort of tap dance around the location more. They have no problem hit bumping you right into enemy fire if they want your hiding space. Weirdly enough, enemies also do not seem to see your AI until you are seen, meaning you can be hiding and one of your AI teammates is standing on a rock in front of the bad guy who will then say, "Someone's around here." No crap, man. She's like literally standing on your damn head. Once you notice this, it becomes a thing. It's a ruthless immersion breaker, especially as a game that can hinge a little bit on that feeling of survival. Last of Us 2 is a weird game. It has some decidedly low budget ways to handle some things I would never have expected. But at the same time, it's premier when it comes to many facets I think gamers may expect from Naughty Dog. And what I felt when I got done was that ultimately, Last of Us 2 suffers from an apathy that exists when it isn't feeding its own appetite to be awesome. When not moving that direct story around, it starts to flounder, framing various tales of revenge and trying to facilitate a goal of reminding the player revenge is a dish best served never is where this game works. Let's talk about fun factor, something that of course we'll never all agree on. Technically, this game is a tour de force in many ways, but in the way I was hoping, as a game, it fell apart. Fun is that razor-thin difference between engaging in the new, mastering the old, and camouflaging the rote. There are for sure times I found Last of Us 2 fun. I feel that it plays better when it comes to the engagements than the original, where I felt the original story was much more elegantly told, and I didn't even really like the pacing in the original. But in the end, one thing happens. The story drug out for me. That filler, it's incredible. You return to the same damn place so many times, each thinking you're now going to go off and do something, and you don't go off and do it. Some weird tangent pops up that lasts hours and never really pays off. And this is something that we all talk about when it comes to filler. Filler for everybody will be a little bit different. For me, the filler really came in, well, anything that didn't involve the direct main story. Combat may have a couple issues, but I did like that. And of course, that brings us to the review. Buy, wait for a sale, rent, or never touch. This is a wait for a sale for me. Now, you may like these kind of things more and give this a buy right away. You may even get mad at me. Guess what? I don't give a shit. We're all going to be different. Everybody's going to think something different when it comes to the games. It drug out for me. Those times that weren't interspersed with the fun of pushing forward, that desire to enact revenge on others, started to fall apart. Naughty Dog, across 20 titles, have been able to envision and then deliver worlds in real time that many other developers strive to hit in CGI target slices for trailers at E3. And while their writing has always capered a bit between whimsical and the serious, with a tangible feeling of almost childlike rebellion, a great big combo breaker in that was The Last of Us, an explosive post-apocalyptic odyssey which had Ellie and Joel fighting off these clickers, which were a cooler version of zombies for a lot of people. But it was also what I feel is a more tactful and certainly more tactile experience and story where everything came together. Now, I do admit, I felt that Last of Us 1 sort of shot all of its energy in that first 15 minutes and was consistently trying to catch up with it later on. But it did, I think, catch up to it in a better way than The Last of Us 2 ever does. So for me, wait for a sale for sure. I'd like to hear what you guys think. I'm sure somebody's going to get mad. Feel free to get mad. Put it in the comments. I'd love to hear you get mad over a video game because it's vital and super important. Other than that, I hope you guys all enjoy yourselves. I hope you're safe and sound. I hope you're enjoying your gaming, whatever it may be that you're playing. If you get a chance, give this a thumbs up. If you dislike it, give it a thumbs down. Stick around for a second because I got to tell you guys something. We're going to be doing a bunch of new videos. You're going to see some new announcements from me, but I do want to say thank you to the new patrons. This has been a horrible couple months. We've had multiple videos now demonetized. Had a couple different companies go and demonetize old videos and basically take their music back, which was weird because they were the ones that gave a lot of us the ability to cover these games and have the music in them, which is incredibly odd. People who jumped into the Patreon, you're absolutely keeping the channel working. I appreciate it. YouTube is shit, and you guys for sure help. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.